Recorded and right now.
Great. All right, so today we've spent about 5 minutes welcoming everyone and doing the little icebreaker. We'll have about 30 minutes of presentation and then a short section at the end to go over any questions that anyone has. And then we'll have a 5-minute section for wrapping up. So first off, I wanted to go ahead and introduce those of you who may be unfamiliar to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is a martial art, and it was originally adapted from Judo and Japanese Jiu Jitsu to allow the smaller person to defend themselves against a larger and stronger attacker. It was actually modified from the original Judo and Japanese Jiu Jitsu to meet the demands of real no-rules fighting that people were experiencing on the streets and beaches of Brazil. So it is an unarmed form of combat, and there's no punching or kicking allowed, though we do go over how to defend against those things. I started this martial art for self-defense and ended up gaining a lot more out of the art than I expected. This is an image of myself in one of my first fights as a blue belt, and you can see that I was the smaller opponent and was able to win against a much larger opponent using strategy and technique. So I noticed right away, because a little background for you, Brian is my father, and he has been in the world of Agile for most of my life. So I have noticed Agile concepts in different arenas throughout my whole life. And when I got into jiu-jitsu, I noticed that just the way the art came about was in a manner adapted using Agile values from the art of judo. So here I have the Agile values, and you can notice that in jiu-jitsu, it's always an individual journey, but they prioritized working technique over adherence to tradition in the formulation of the art. They also went with athlete collaboration over adherence to tradition. And that was demonstrated by, in Brazil, when the art was created, they used to invite people from different martial arts and strategies to come into their gyms and spar with them. And they would record the sparring sessions, and they would study the footage and adjust their technique to resolve any holes in their technique that was causing like different weaknesses. So if a street fighter came in and was able to punch you and that's the end of the fight right there, they implemented different blocks that you can use to get past that initial punch and then utilize the opponent's movement against them. So I noticed right away that jiu-jitsu had Agile concepts in it. Go ahead and go to the next slide here. So as far as my beginning and where I started, this is me on the left in 2017. I had just gotten over hip surgery after an accident, and I was at my heaviest. I weighed about 270 pounds in this photo, and it was difficult for me to walk any kind of long distance. And I knew I wanted to be healthier. And as I mentioned, I started for self-defense. So I signed up for jiu-jitsu. And I ended up doing my first competition in 2019, about 6 months into my journey as a white belt. This was at a small local Fuji. Fuji is a competition model that's great for beginners. And I had a 2-woman division. It was myself and the other lady in this photo. There were 150 competitors in the entire competition, and it was held in a local high school gymnasium. I had just started working with Kanban in MaxAgility, actually, when we had our Agile Elder Care section. And I had noticed a variety of things. First of all, if you look at this picture, I won. But if you look at my face, it looks like I don't feel very good about it. So I had a lot of lack of confidence, and I was very unsure of myself. And I went to my teammates afterwards and I was like, is this what it normally feels like when you compete? Because I'm very uncomfortable. I don't feel good. Like, I'm anxious. I actually had to use the trash can on the side. We call it an emotional support trash can, because a lot of times when you deal with a huge adrenaline dump, you vomit or you like have all sorts of different problems. And that was a major issue for me in my first 6 competitions. I realized I didn't like that feeling, and I didn't like being so scared, especially if I was winning, and I wanted to continue pursuing this and getting better at it. So on the right-hand side, you see me in my 6th competition. This is now 2 years later, and I have lost almost 50 pounds in this picture. And I am, again, hyperventilating and in the middle of a panic attack while winning a match. You can see my coach pulling me aside, telling me, I need you to breathe, like in and out through your nose, like it's okay. It's, again, a small local Fuji. This was a 3-woman division, so a little larger, still about 150 competitors. I had just gotten my certified Scrum Master official certification and started working with Scrum. And this is when I decided that I wanted to apply what I learned in Agile and Scrum to my Jiu-Jitsu training, because I was tired of feeling this way, especially if I was winning. So I looked at the Agile Manifesto, the values and the principles, and I decided to go through it and say, how can I modify this for martial arts? So I took this first principle here and said, okay, for changing requirements, I obviously have different competitors every time I compete. So a different competitor has a different body size, a different style, a different level of aggression. There's all sorts of different things that they're bringing to the table that I have to respond to quickly if I want to win. Then the next one, I noticed that it was a pretty easy comparison to take competition performance and translate that to a working product. So I decided that I needed to compete more often. In Jiu-Jitsu, you hear a lot about getting 1% better every day. So for those of you who are familiar with the concept of Kaizen, that sounds very familiar. And I looked at myself and I was like, if I am hyperventilating, having panic attacks, and trying not to puke in the middle of a match, and I'm going to get 1% better every time I try at this, how many competitions do I need? And that's when I really kicked up the pace and started competing a lot more. I noticed here business people and developers working together daily throughout the project. So for this, I translated business people to professors of the art or black belts. As a developer, that's more the students. So I ended up switching schools so that I could consistently work with black belts, because my original school, our black belt did not come to every class and did not teach every class. So I was working with other developers trying to figure out strategy, and it wasn't working very well. Then I noticed that I needed to get the environment and support that I needed. Again, I switched schools. I moved from Ohio down to North Carolina and started training at a gym that had multiple world champions in it. And in the Agile principle, it says that you need to trust your people to get the job done. And that's an important thing to note. When you go out to compete, your coach is there, but he's not on the mat, right? Like when I'm doing the work myself, it's just me. And he's got to be able to trust me to do the work the right way. Then we have working product as the primary measure of progress. So product, I translated to technique, and I shifted my focus from winning gold to focusing on my technique and my performance inside of the match. So rather than focusing so much on winning, which was causing so much of that pressure and anxiety that I was having to deal with, I focused on how well am I showing my technique and how well am I performing? Then, as you're all familiar, sustainable development is extremely important. When I first started, I was training on my world championship journey. I've gone to worlds 3 different times, and the first 2 times I lost my first match, and it's single elimination. So if you go out to Las Vegas, you've spent $1,000 on registration, hotel, airplane, lodging, like all of that. Lose your first match, it's over. That was $1,000 for 2 minutes, 5 minutes at most. So it's pretty frustrating. So I thought maybe if I go harder, it'll help out. So I was training 6 times a week, 4 times a day, did not place at all. And then I was like, well, Agile says I should be sustainable. So I switched to a more sustainable pace, and I started training 5 times a week, 1 to 2 times a day. And with that cadence where it was much more sustainable and I wasn't on a death march grinding myself into the ground, I actually achieved 3 different world medals in 3 different arts. So I have a little show and tell for you here if you can see my video. This is the CXBJJ Gold World Championship. We took silver this year at the IBJJF Masters Worlds in Las Vegas. And I also tried my hand at a different art called Sambo and took gold in my division the first time trying that out, and silver overall against a woman from the country of Georgia. So sustainable pace worked really well. It was scary at first to slow down because recovery is important, and I know that, but traditionally I thought that I had to be driving myself into the ground to be successful, and that wasn't the case. And Agile knows that and teaches us that. So the next principle here is on our continuous attention to technical excellence. So I, again, focused on skill acquisition. And I heard a multiple-time world champion that I had taken a seminar from say this phrase, which you'll hear a lot throughout this presentation, which is you win or you learn. And so I shifted that mindset, and it was really powerful. Then simplicity. In jiu-jitsu, there are thousands of techniques. So I decided to focus on finding people with my same body type and then refining based off of the things that came naturally to me and that worked well for my body type. I sought out different instructors and seminars who were teaching the same technique so that I could focus on getting better at one thing at a time. So rather than trying to get better at 1,000 things, I got better at one thing at a time. Then regularly retrospecting. So I decided to do a retrospective after every competition that I did, and we'll go over that in a little more detail soon. But you can see that there's a lot of Agile principles that easily translate to martial arts and competition. So Kaizen, the continuous improvement, and the BJJ 1%. So we say get 1% better every day. 1% better is really highlighting the importance of sustainable and incremental improvement. So on the physical aspect, in 5 years, I went from 270 pounds to 170 pounds. So I lost 100 pounds in that time. I did not start this journey with the intent of losing weight. It came about from getting 1% better every day. So I learned about proper diet in order to fuel my performance. I learned what macros are and how to optimize them for my training. I learned about the importance of rest. I actually started tracking my sleep and prioritizing it like it was just as important as going to my jiu-jitsu classes. I started fueling for performance versus eating for comfort. I used to eat what I felt like because it made me feel good emotionally, and I shifted that mindset to eating what made my body feel good and feel like I have a lot of good energy. I switched to whole foods versus processed foods. So like keeping it as close to like whole veggies and whole ingredients that you can go and grab off a grocery store shelf rather than boxes that have paragraphs of ingredients. And then it was really important to focus on consistency and balance. So you can ask my family members. I still will often eat a slice of cake or a bite of pie at any of our holiday celebrations, because going extremely hard and saying I'll never eat any of that ever again is a great way to make sure that your whole plan fails. So I try to say that I'm like 80% on my healthy diet and 20% is for living life and celebrating it. So if I have to make weight for Worlds or something, I might not be able to eat pie that week, but you can bet the next week I'm going to ask if I can stop by for a different slice. Then the mental aspect. So this was, in my opinion, a far greater transformation than my physical transformation. So we talked a bit about the mentality that I had been bringing to the table, where I was anxious and felt all this pressure to perform and to win. And even winning, I was not feeling good about myself. And then on the right-hand side, this is last weekend. So here I just won the absolute finals match against a woman who was 50 pounds heavier than me. And you can see that I am confident and comfortable. And that is the results of getting 1% more confident every day for 5 years. I did that in a variety of ways. one of the first things I knew I needed to do was to decrease fear. And we've had psychological safety workshops for MaxAgility before, where we talk about this. And I was able to implement some of those concepts into my own training as well. But fear is paralyzing, and that's not good for anybody in corporate. It's not good for anybody trying to perform as an athlete. And something that helped me to overcome some of that fear is some words of wisdom from Theodore Roosevelt. Many of you are familiar with his Man in the Arena speech, and the pieces that really hit home for me were that he who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. And then if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, because I realized it was really the failure that I was afraid of. And this speech gave me the permission that I needed to fail. It said, it's a good thing. It's part of success. If you don't fail, if you don't come short again and again, then you will never know the great enthusiasms or the great devotions. And I knew that I wanted to try, and that at the worst, I was going to experience failure. And at the best, I was going to know the triumph of high achievement, and I wanted to try. So this picture is one of my favorites, because in this picture, I lost, and the woman on the other side of the picture won. And you can see such a massive difference in mindset here. Here, I was so excited because I had found somebody that could beat me, and that meant that I had more room to grow. And anytime I lose in competition, it gives me a very crystal clear direction of where I need to go to improve. So if I lose by a joint lock, I know I need to improve my defense on my joint locks. And now it's really easy to see what I need to focus on next. So I worked really hard in my mindset transformation on embracing change. You may have heard the old military adage of embrace the suck. That is often heard in the martial arts arena as well. And I focused on progress over perfection. So rather than wanting to get gold every single time, I wanted to get better in my skills. So I focused on skill acquisition. We also talk a lot about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. In jiu-jitsu, you are often put into extremely uncomfortable positions, and you have to not panic and continue working on your strategy. And then failing fast to learn fast. So you've heard me say this already in here. You win or you learn. And this, again, was the attitude shift from gold as the prize to skill acquisition as the prize. I didn't care so much about what I was doing in placement as I did on performance. So if I performed well and lost and made progress on the skills that I was working on, I was more proud of myself than if I had an easy win. Then I also had to reframe a lot. I had a lot of negative thought patterns. So I used to think, well, I can't do that, especially when I weighed 270 pounds. I was like, I can't even hardly walk like around the grocery store. How am I supposed to walk out onto a world championship mat, right? And if when I first started, my teammates joked that most people start at square one and I started at square zero. I had to learn not to do like a squat properly. When I first started, I could not do a sit-up. And I used to say, I can't do a sit-up. And I had to shift that to, I can't do a sit-up yet. I can't do this yet. And that gave me permission to continue trying. Permission to fail gives you permission to grow. So I shifted from, I suck at this to I'm learning, I'm new at this, and that's okay. Switching from I failed to I am actively improving. And just every time I had those really negative thoughts, taking a moment to take that thought captive and switch it and then move forward was key. I also used demo, retrospective, and sprint planning throughout this process. So competition I used as my demo. This was my chance to show my skills, let me check on where my different techniques were, and I demonstrated my working product, which was my technique. So during the match, you can see on the left here, we've seen this picture before, this is effort without direction. This is what a death march looks like. I was putting my entire effort, I was hyperventilating, you can see how pale I am. I was about to pass out from effort, but I was working on the epic. I just wanted to win the match. I didn't really know how. I just had this big goal and was just trying to do it and putting everything I could into it, working 80-hour weeks, so to speak, and it wasn't working very well. On the right-hand side, you can see a totally different approach. And this is effort with direction. So instead of working on an epic, I broke things down into stories. So within the match, instead of saying, I want to win gold, I'd say, I want to get the takedown. I want to get on top. I want to work on my submission. Breaking it down into smaller steps gave me clear direction and kept me focused and motivated throughout the match. Then retro, I would review the footage with my professors. I'd go over keeping, stopping, and starting, different things that were working or not working. Ask myself what went well, what didn't go well, make some slight adjustments and implement them in the next competition. Sometimes that's as simple as, hey, when you swept, which is when you move somebody from being on top of you to being on bottom, your arm was up too high. And that's what ended up with you getting an arm bar. So like this last weekend, I got arm barred. And it's because my hand was a little bit too high. So in my retro, my coach was like, just keep your hand a little bit lower. And so immediately in training, I started focusing on that same sweep, putting my hand in the right place. Rather than completely revamping the whole plan, I just made a slight adjustment and then continued on. Sprint planning was my competition cadence. So I noticed that in the concept of Agile, you should always be going in 2 to 4 week sprints, sometimes 1 week, sometimes 4 weeks, just depends on what you're doing. And I realized that going to competition a couple of times a year was not going to let me improve very quickly. So Brian often says in his coaching, how fast do you want to improve when setting a sprint cadence? And I wanted to improve a lot faster than twice a year. So I shifted to a much more aggressive competition schedule. Many jiu-jitsu practitioners do not compete this often, but it allowed me to quickly and consistently make adjustments to my training patterns. Different stories I would implement into my sprints between competitions. We're adding in weightlifting programs, adjusting the amount of cardio I was doing. I wanted to have more confidence in technique, so I started teaching kids class because teaching will make sure that you have really good technique. And I would cross-train at other schools as well. Anytime I noticed a hole in my training, I would find an expert and fix it. I'm going to go ahead and skip that example because we're a little bit short on time here. But I did focus a lot on progress over perfection. I don't need gold every time, but I do need to learn. And you fail fast to learn fast. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record here a little bit, but you win or you learn. And that allows you to not fall into a depression as well if you lose. So if you go to Worlds and you've spent your whole year and $1,000 to get out there and it all fails and blows up in your face and you get submitted in a minute in your first match, it's important to be able to quickly pick up the pieces and get back to the drawing board and keep on going. And a lot of people will just stop going to the gym for 3 months or something like that because they're so upset that they don't even want to keep trying. And it's important to not be that scared of failure. So confidence in your wins. I wanted to show you guys what all of what we've just talked about looks like in its grand culmination. So in 2019, call back to the beginning of the presentation here, 2 people in my division, 150 competitors in the gym of a high school in Columbus, Ohio, and not looking like the winner. And then on the right-hand side, this is me in last month in Las Vegas. I had 22 women in my division. There were 20,000 competitors, and it was held at the Greater Convention Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. And you can see that I have a lot more confidence here and that I look like and feel like a world champion. And I think it's important to look at these 2 pictures and realize the power that Agile has for mindset transformation. This culture shift is why we have Agile. In the corporate world, do you want your teams to look like the woman on the left, the one from 2019, or the one on the right from 2023? That's the same woman, just one has been implementing Agile concepts for years, and the other is just kind of blindly trying to get better on a death march. And I think that especially lately, Agile has kind of gotten away from that culture shift and focused so much on process that we forgot about the people a little bit along the way. And so I'd love to see Agile embrace that mindset shift and true culture change more in the future, because I think that every corporation can benefit from their people feeling like the woman in 2023 here. And that brings me to my next slide, which is where are we now? So we talked about the beginning and where I started. And now I am the world champion for CXBJJ. I am a medalist in over 10 different formats. There's different ways to judge who has won a match in different rule sets. And I've competed in over 10 different rule sets and medaled in all of them. I've competed nationwide in over 14 different states. I was the inaugural GLOSS scholarship recipient. GLOSS is the Grappling Ladies of Southeastern States. It's a group of about 600 women that are trying to elevate the region on the national scale, and they put together a scholarship to send me to Worlds this year. So I was very, very proud to be able to medal and podium for my first time as the scholarship recipient there representing the region. I'm a 4-time PanAmerican medalist for the IBJJF, which is the largest jiu-jitsu organization in the world. I'm a 14-time gold medalist in the IBJJF Opens, which are their smaller state-level tournaments. And I, as I mentioned before, am the silver medalist for the Sambo Open Nationals, which is their version of the World Championship. And that's a mixed form of martial arts. And then I'm a 4-time Toro Cup Champion, and there's a variety of other accolades that I can tell you about, but I think this picture kind of sums it up for you. So I have a medal case that's bursting at the seams. So as many people think that you need to focus on getting gold in order to get gold, focusing on skill acquisition will bring you plenty of wins. And that brings me to the end of our presentation. So I'll go ahead and put this up here. This is feedback for the presentation, and we're also going to open it up for a Q&A session. So if anybody has any questions, you can either raise your hand and we can do it that way, or if you are not comfortable with raising your hand, you can go ahead and put your questions into the chat.
See, somebody said they weren't seeing the slides. I had turned the spotlight on for you. Is there a specific slide that someone couldn't see? Feel free to pop it into the chat, or we can just leaf through some of the ones that we've gone through in reverse order, if that makes sense to do so, Sarah.
Yeah, sure.
Hey, Sarah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you remind me, or I may have just missed it, how you got into jiu-jitsu in the beginning? Like, what gave you the motivation to choose that out of the 100,000 things you could have done?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for self-defense. So this is a pretty small group. I'll get a little personal with you guys. I have been assaulted several different times, and I got really tired of not knowing what to do or how to protect myself. So calling back to the beginning, where jiu-jitsu is an art that is created for a smaller person to be able to successfully defend themselves against a stronger, larger opponent, that's what called me to this sport in particular. I wanted to find the most efficient method of protecting myself and utilize that. I also trained in Muay Thai for 2 years, so I do have some experience with the stand-up aspect, which is the kicking and the punching, but I don't find it as fun. And when I started competing in jiu-jitsu, I really fell in love with the puzzle and the strategy aspect, and just really found it to be very fun. It was also very challenging and also very meaningful, because I train in a very large gym that has lots of different body shapes and sizes. So I can go and test out my skills against a 6'5", 300-pound guy if I feel like it. And now that I've been training for 5 years, I am confident that I can easily control that sparring session now. So it gives me the ability to really check and see that I am able to accomplish those goals of protecting myself. It's also part of why I compete so much, is because in the gym, you don't have as much intensity. Like, people aren't trying to hurt you. They're trying to help you learn and to focus on your technique. In competition, especially at the high levels, it's a very different ballgame. People are going at you. They are trying to choke you out. They are trying to break your arm. They are trying to mess you up. And so to be able to protect myself and win against a very much resisting opponent is very valuable for me. Does that answer your question?
It does. And through that, you were able to learn all these other skill sets along the way, as far as the mindset thing, and apply them in different areas of your life.
Yeah.
Is that what this is?
Yeah, absolutely. So I applied just the Agile principles to mindset transformation and physical transformation within an athletic aspect.
Okay. I'm glad to know of this. And if you can tell me, because I'm a realtor, and that is a dangerous, or can be a dangerous career to be in. And we do talk about self-defense and safety. Sometimes, honestly, we don't talk about it enough. And I don't know if it's because it's just not been enough incidents. There have been some, but you know, they don't make the front page. But I think this will be something good, one, for me to take, because I have done a self-defense class as one of my con eds, but something that I can probably even just share in our community, in my real estate agent community, of something that we can do. Is there something local that is available for training?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I train at Shell Shock Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and we actually have a free self-defense program that we run with CrossFit Shoe Fly every other Thursday. So that's a very easy way to get into it. My first, so I took a self-defense class. I took 4 self-defense classes, and like after the assaults, and was very frustrated because when I was assaulted again after the self-defense class, I couldn't remember the moves, especially under the intensity of the situation. And that's why it's important to train on a consistent basis, because it needs to come naturally to you in a high intensity situation. So that's why I train consistently. I think that all women should train for at least 6 months, 3 times a week, as a way to get a base level of defense. And we talk about jiu-jitsu being a superpower within the community, but it's a renewable one. So you have to consistently train in order to keep those skills sharp. It's like riding a bike, kind of. If you aren't used to it and haven't ridden in 10 years, it might take you a little bit to get used to it again. And so it's good to maintain those skills.
Okay. Can you tell me what the name of the gym is?
Yeah, so mine is Shell Shock Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I'd be happy to give you a list, because the Greater Triangle area has a ton of different schools available that are really great women's programs.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. Do you want me to send you my email, or?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay. You want me to put it in the chat?
Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Rajan, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Let me say it was a fabulous presentation. There's a lot to get inspired from. My question is more on, you very well brought 2 worlds together, Agile with Jiu Jitsu. At what point did you trigger that thought that there is value in bringing Agile to your world of sport? And what made you keep going and continuously bringing all that mindset in here?
Yeah, so I would say it was back in 2021 with that picture of myself and my coach. I was getting my CSM certification, and there was something about him stopping me mid-match. So he told the ref that I needed to fix my uniform, and called me over and was like, I need you to breathe. Like, we need to calm down, get your head back in the game, fix your gi, and let's go and get that gold. And there was something about the pause that kind of triggered that thought in me. I was like, what if I paused and reflected and did like a retrospective, like in my sport? I wonder if that would work. And so that's kind of what I was, that's kind of like what triggered it for me, was taking the certification and being a beginner in the certification and being a beginner in the sport. And I just noticed so many different similarities between what I was hearing in the gym and what I was hearing in my certification classes. So get 1% better every day, just focus on one small thing to get better at every time, Kaizen and continuous improvement. We went over all the different principles at the beginning of all those different easy similarities. And I was like, this is just awfully similar. And I think it's important to note that Jeff Sutherland trained in judo, which is the like father sport of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And so I think that he was inspired by a lot of the different things he saw in the art. And that's part of why it was so easy to find so many commonalities between the two.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like we've got a couple of things in the chat here.
No questions that I see.
Okay. And Martin, it looks like you have a question.
And now, of course, my camera's not working, but my Zoom background's working, so that's great.
Yeah.
I just want to say, awesome presentation, and just to say to the group, I started a martial arts journey about 6 months ago, and I'm in my 40s, and like same thing. It's at first it's very intimidating.
Yeah.
And also, like for me, like I'm always the oldest person in the room, and it's the average age of the room is like middle school age, but
Really?
a handful of adults that float in and out. But I'm already on my first stripe of my second belt.
Congratulations.
And it's a great thing to do. And yeah, I also think a lot about agility and like continuous improvement. Like I was thinking like, what's holding me back and what's something I can improve on. And like for me, that was like flexibility. And like taking it, one day at a time, one approach at a time. There's an app called Bend, and it takes like 5 minutes, the same amount of time that you would spend on Duolingo just to do like 5 basic stretches. And like with that, my kicks got better, my striking got better, my kata got better because I had better balance.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's for anyone that's thinking about it. Like one, you're not too old, and two, it improves other areas of your life. So I was super excited to see this presentation. So just want to give kudos and say congratulations and awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much. I started at the age of 28, and it's, I think, important to note, and I didn't note this earlier, that as a child, every sport I tried, I failed at. And I was told by multiple coaches, have you considered music? Because I don't think sports is for you. And so that's really funny to everyone in my gym now, because like I have these world titles and everything. But you're not too late. You're not too old, and you can do more than you know. I started at the age of 28, and in 5 years was able to completely transform myself from a non-athlete to a world champion, using these Agile principles and just focusing on that 1% better every day. And I think it's really powerful to note that, Martin, that it's okay to begin even if you're not in middle school. I think a lot of adults are afraid to begin things because they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to be a beginner. And I think that the white belt of any martial art is a bit of an unsung hero, because they have the courage to face that fear and to face that failure and to be a beginner. In order to learn to be good at something. And in my travels and competing across the nation, I have met so many inspiring people. There is a woman named Elaine, who on Instagram is Jiu Jitsu Grandma. She started at the age of 68 and is now 74 with a purple belt and competes at the national level. I watched her take silver to, in her words, one of the young girls. She was fighting a 65-year-old, and was just thrilled to have the opportunity to practice her skills. And that kind of gave me a great perspective shift as well. That helped with me looking at skill acquisition as the real prize instead of gold as the real prize, because here's this woman who's in the last third of her life and I'm still in the middle third of my life. And she didn't care about getting gold or getting silver. She cared about progress. And if a woman with 7 grandkids is not old enough to start at this, then I knew I didn't have a good excuse saying like, oh, I'm 32 and my bones hurt. Like, which, I mean, I've been in multiple car accidents. I've had multiple surgeries. I have arthritis. I have a chronic illness. And I was able to overcome all of those things. And partially because I saw other women who were double my age, overcoming far greater things at the world level as well, because they just focused on what they could do instead of what they couldn't do. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Along those lines, I heard a quote, I think Henry Ford said, if you think you can, you're right. And if you think you cannot, you are right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We quote that a lot. I'll hear people after watching a technique say, I can't do that. And I'll immediately be like, yet, I can't do that yet.
Right.
Or I'll tell them, well, you're right. And they're like, what? And I'm like, if you believe you can't, you're not even going to try. And if you're not even trying,
Absolutely.
you're definitely not going to get it. Like,
I see John has his hand raised.
Yeah, I had a question about culture and culture change and kind of whether, like, in your experience going and visiting all these different gyms and going to these different tournaments, I was just wondering if it's a very regular experience to bump into people that don't already have that continuous improvement thing. Just sounds like martial arts is already kind of Kaizen focused in that way for the most part. And I was just curious if you saw that trend as like a pre-existing culture at these gyms.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And in my travels, I've probably trained at over 20 different schools at this point, just dropping in and taking classes to kind of see what the culture is like in different states. I've stopped into schools in different regions, anywhere from New Orleans to Vegas to Ohio to Colorado. So I've gotten to experience a lot of different regions. And I've noticed that for the majority, schools that compete do have a very strong focus on continuous improvement and Kaizen. That culture is very prevalent. But you will often find schools that are hobbyist schools. So they do not compete. And I do not see that culture as prevalent inside of those schools. It seems to be a stronger focus on ego and feeling strong and feeling powerful versus seeking out challenges and ways that you can improve. So like my professor, John Schell, is a world champion brown belt. He has his 2nd degree on his black belt now and is working on becoming a world champion black belt. But he is constantly going out to competitions. He will fight people 20 years younger than him. He's 49. He started jiu-jitsu at 34. So he's only been doing jiu-jitsu for 15 years. And a lot of the black belts that he's fighting in his division started when they were 5. And so they have 50 years of experience and he has 15. And he's not afraid to lose if he's able to improve on his skills. So I think that attitude is very prevalent within my school in particular, but I've also met people at other schools who they have black belts who don't compete because they don't want to lose. They want to walk around and feel untouchable. So I think it is important to keep your eyes open because the culture is not just across the board fantastic inside of martial arts gyms. I have also seen just like really fantastic, warm, welcoming, supportive environments. So it's important to know that people are people and you can still have bad apples inside of martial arts. But I think that the martial art in its purest form and at its core has continuous improvement as a major tenet. So if they're really, truly martial artists, then you're going to see that culture there.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Just a comment from Martin in karate. There's a lot of lean concepts.
Yeah.
So that's interesting concept there, Martin. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm putting in the chat from the collateral that we have talking about lean, little chart there, so people can reference that for additional information.
Awesome.
We've got about 5 minutes left. We want to give a 5-minute buffer so people have time to go between meetings, but we do have about 5 more minutes. If anybody has any feedback, comments, questions, so anything else?
Yeah, I'll put this slide back up here actually, and I'll send this out to those of you who attended. The recording we'll send out, and we'll also send out the link to the feedback form. So if you guys can give me feedback on this, that would be fantastic. I would love to help other people with mindset transformations, as well as help athletes to improve themselves better and faster with Agile concepts. So any feedback you have on how I can get that across more clearly or anything like that would be fantastic.
That link is also in our chat for your use of reference. You don't need to belabor the point, but any other questions, comments, live feedback? If not, then
Awesome.
Thank you, Sarah,
Yeah.
for putting together this terrific presentation. Thanks everybody for your attendance today. We will be, as Sarah noted, sending out additional information and a link to the presentation and a link to the recording. And please share that with your friend community. We'll post about it on LinkedIn as a public note as well. Thanks so much, everybody.
Yeah, if you'd like to follow along on my continued martial arts journey, you can follow me on Instagram or on Facebook. And I will actually be achieving the next level in jiu-jitsu, which is my purple belt, on November 18th. So I'm very excited to be moving up in levels. I'm not supposed to talk about it necessarily yet. So don't tell all your friends about that just yet.
Nicely done, as always. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.